Ia tātou Amata I se tatalo o saunia I le awhionga ia Sala.
Faaluaomete tātou I wha matatalo. Le tuailo mātou tamā, mātou toe whaongale nei lau lau. Mātou wangawanga iai tomai ese a wā lava le whaalele ia atili o le mātou tautua mo alom whanau o Samoa I le ngata I nei Aotearoa, Samoa, ia Australia, Hawaii, Amerika. Ia maso se tu e whao le nei ke lope. Mātou te talo le atua I alo whamanuia mai le nei au nanga. Ai mai se fo I le Blue Wave o lo langolangoina I mātou. Ia maonga Amata lava o New Zealand. Ia toi whaafo ia tuaile vi inga I lau fio. Whaaftai le atua mo mea lava. Amene.
Amen. E muamua ona au whatu lau I pa ia o le atua. Tulong nā oe le sisiri ese, le matai sau, le maalama mai le saua, le tufunga poto nā fua mea vi ia oe e whawawau. Tulou le malu tau o tangata whenua, o le maawe ese I le tātou ainga Pasifika, whaapea le au fia o Samoa wa o whanga poto mai I le nei wha moi. Tulouna. Ai o te whatulou atu I le au whainga luenga pa ia le atua, o tātou mafuta mai le nei upenga, tupu mai o le tātou atu mai I itulangi e 5. Samoa, Australia, Hawaii, Amerika, ma New Zealand. Susunga I pulenga ma whai aonga whaapea mātua ma le whānau. O aonga Amata a Samoa mai I itu e whā o le laulangi. Tupu matamali'i o le tātou atu upele o Samoa. Tā lofa lava I o autopa ia mamamana. Just acknowledging this week is Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori Language Week. Tuia te rangi e tū nei, tuia te papa e tokoto nei, tuia te here tāngata tihei, mauri ora. He honore he korori o te atua, he maunga rongo ki te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki nā tāngata katoa. Before I introduce our speakers, today's webinar will be a panel of which I will ask the questions and facilitate stirring conversation with our speakers as they present their research findings. We are privileged today to have our guest speakers as the AATA Co-Directors. So we have Dr. Sala, Pafitimai, Faasaulala, Tagoilelagi-Leota. We have Dr. Tafili, Utumapu McBride, and Auckland University of Technology Associate Professor Faalogo, Aganoa, Jacoba Matapo. It's such a privilege to have 3 Samoan diaspora language pioneers with us today to share space and share the awesome work that they have done over the years. For more information on their profiles and the works that they have done, you can find it on www.falapepeepaepa.com. Now to the questions. Lawa fionga Sala, manatu o loo fia sila fia e le tātou au fia, po o lea le a ata, ai se ana whaatu ai lea au nanga wha muli.
Whaftai lava mo le fasili. Na iese languna, o le nei upenga o fina ngalo, se iwa vai foe, ona o lea ua tele ina sa saa mai le oa mai I tūlangi ese. Toi o Australia le whaatalitali mo November, o lena na umatu nei Hawaii, ai se o mai le a ata, o a ata ma le Blue Wave o ngalo lue whaatasi nei upenga o fina ngalo po le webinar international Aoga Amata. Ina ia tau atu fo se mātou tautua, ia o le a ata o le Aoga Amata transnational Aotearoa, o te whaingoina lava o mātou o le uso la ititi o le saasia. Lana o mātou e members uma I le saasia. Wa leva fo e ona mātou mātou ngā lulue whaatasi ma le sunga le Palestine ia e mai se fo I le ofisa malo sa asia. O le atala, o le mataitu ti, le transnational. That is our point of difference. Mai le sa asia, o sa asia wa patino mo Aoga Amata e New Zealand. Ai le tu ai fo I lato fia o ngai fafo. A o le ata. Transnational o le vaenga lea e whaapea e mawhai ona transfer, low nationality, your nationalism, I le so se itu langi e te au mawai. Wherever you go, you take your identity and your culture with you. which is why we call ourselves transnationals, not diaspora, because we were not forced out of our country. We left Samoa on our own accord. We left willingly. Ele I whai mai sesi o SM Samoa. SM Samoa le o tō atunu le ai o le senga lana le whaonga e le ata le upu le transnational. It's a nice positive word. O le tautua la le ata le taimine ia o le webina le whai nei ia ele se tupe ata maua i le nei upenga o fina ngalo e whai fua uma le langolango ina e o le mato our chair today, all voluntary, all le blue wave ia o le polofesa nei ma le mato au waa ma le tele o isi fola sanga wa umatu ia o lo whai mai le ngalue ma le loto 48 ina ia whaalelea le tautua mo whanau. Ia wa iaina I suenga wa umana whaatino o le suenga la le mau te wha I loa tu nei aso o le Pepe Meamea o le auvaa e pe ona sila fie le auvaa ia pe ana o pauleo se whaala potopotonga o mātou uma o tina ia o isi wa tina o tina maua ule grandmother mother uma le uma ika ia matutua ia tea ia ole e whai uma lava ia e whai a Onga University. We are all Samoan women academics. So o le sina malo si anga o le mato tautua e tele lava ina mato o I fafo e lima tunu ule waiai o Samoa, o Australia, o Hawaii, o Amerika. Ia mane New Zealand. O lo tamu whai e sosolo atu isi I tūlangi. Ia au maua uma ia whanau o Samoa o lo au mau ia tunu. I fafo ia peo se o tonga na o le mato au waa ia o le mato tautua e whaina whai suenga, curriculum development, assessment and evaluation, o program development ia e tele lava ia le tāleni le mato au waa nei. Ia e mese foi cultural intelligence, framing o le whaonga ina o cultural intelligence a Samoa, tu mato mai o Samoa I le ngau singa o ni ala ngā oa, ia ma le Faaloalo lava whawhitai lava le Lefaoali'i.
Ta alofa lau awhionga le polofesa whaalongo. Can you tell us about the Pepe Meamea research project whamole lava? Ai se awa patino ai le nei suenga mo anu mawhaanga o Samoa. Why Samoan infants and toddlers framework?
Yeah, Faasaulala Fasili. Thank you for the question. First and foremost, just building on what Sala has already shared about our three of us as women in academics, but also the history that we have, particularly in Aoga Amata, and the scholarship and research from a New Zealand perspective. So it's evident for each of us as we've been teaching over the years, especially training the next generation of early childhood teachers, it's evident in the work that we have done that there is a lack of research that is available in the scholarship around infants and toddlers, Samoan infant and toddler pedagogy and philosophy. So this idea has been bubbling away for some time for us, decades, I think, of work in the space, and realising that through the Teaching and Learning Research Initiative, we would be able to put forward an application and consider an in-depth study with our Aoga Amata partners and our experienced whaiaonga in those contexts to create the first, actually, international framework for infant and toddler pedagogy. So the significance of that is realising that in early childhood education, and this is still relevant today, a lot of the scholarship we use to teach and train our teachers and that we integrate in the curriculum and in our own practice is actually borrowed. Those frameworks are borrowed predominantly from Western frameworks. So what that means is there's a Western lens on child development, there's a Western lens on the quality of early childhood, and what we wanted to do was challenge this. So this is how we developed the Pepe Meamea framework, and thinking about how we can uplift and ensure that our Indigenous knowledge system is at the forefront of what we do. So if we just look at the research questions, which I have on one of the slides here, the project went for 2 years, from 2021 to 2022. And I acknowledge too, this was during COVID time, so it was a little bit challenging with the research project. But we're really proud of our 6 Aoga Amata, Seonga Ngongo Aoga Amata, Utumapu Aoga Amata, Tai Ao Whau I Puasese Preschool, Fetu Taiala Aoga Amata, Tu Manu Ai Le Tu Longolongo Aoga Amata, and Tai Ao Whau I Puasese Preschool, Winthrop Way. So with all of those Aoga Amata centres involved in the project, we were able to co-create a framework with our whaeonga, with the Aonga communities, and also thinking about how we start using those frameworks in the Early Childhood Centre. So if we come back to the questions, you know, we're asking, what is Pepe Meamea? So, poale upu leo le Pepe Meamea? It's an important question because the way that we were thinking about infants and toddlers, even the notion of infant and toddler is trying to define a child by what they can do and what they can't do. And that construct of infant and toddler don't necessarily fit tidy in a Samoan reference. So we thought about this with the teachers, with the whaeonga. Poale upu leo le infant and toddler. So the concept that our whaeonga came up with is o le concept leo le Pepe Meamea. So then Pepe Meamea became the name of the research project, because we were led by our teachers around that upu, poale upu lea. So that suited it best. So thinking about the questions, Samoan Indigenous knowledge, thinking about how it's used in the community. And then in the second year, we're not going to talk too much about this, but in the second year, we partnered the Aoga Amata with the English medium centres. And you might wonder why the English medium centres? Well, we have over 25,000 in New Zealand, over 25,000 under 4-year-olds, Samoan under 4-year-olds. So what does that mean? It means that the majority of our Samoan Pepe Meamea are actually attending our English medium services. So we need a framework that can be utilised and grown within Aoga Amata, at the same time adapted and supporting culturally responsive practice in our English medium centres for the majority of our Samoan Pepe Meamea. So that's why we had to try and build a more agile framework that can be used across the different contexts for ECE. I think we'll move to the next slide. So I just wanted to share some new stats which have come out. This gives the context why it's so important that, you know, the rich legacy of Samoan Aoga Amata in New Zealand needs to remain the focus, despite the shifting agendas of our governments, despite the shifting agenda of education policy. What we know is that Samoan communities are a growing population within New Zealand, and that a lot of our younger children currently still do not have access to Aoga Amata, to even bilingual services or even full immersion services. So in New Zealand, there's over 4,400 early childhood services, and guess what? There's only 31 Samoan immersion early childhood centres. That's 0.7%. So this tells us there's a need. There is a need for Aoga Amata for the future. And our total Samoan population from the 2023 census is 213,000. Samoan still has the highest percentage of total Pacific population in New Zealand. And there's the number, sorry, it's 22,000 794 Samoan children aged between 0 to 4 years old. So this is why Pepe Meamea framework is so important. It's an opportunity for us to advocate for the quality practice, cultural practice for our Samoan children. Yeah. I think I answered the question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, look.
Thank you very much. That was beautifully framed. I particularly love that you were able to share figures and statistics, as that's really important when we're trying to push these initiatives through government and policy. Lau sunga Tafili, se whailoa mai lava po o ai na awaile nei su eswenga whaapea le tau team.
Whataia loa fionga. Tu say for a le slide le ye uma swafo nga. Tu sol mato project team le mato uma. I may say mato research assistant lato swafel nga a laloi for tu say so engai te taunga yai se fautuang. Tangata fautu ya mato tu so Dr. le Hinekura Smith o ia le o le sui le o tangata whenua maoli e fo i meisi whaia aunga ia ma tangata fo i Dr. Karen Aspiden, Dr. Chris Jenkin e fo i sui a Samoa le sunga le fatua ya Sadie Fiti, Associate Professor Vau Vasau Manaya, me ripa toso, me losi sua, me sa fo sunga ya ene tapusoa. O ngai dinga ia, o uso ia wa lewa lato tau tua i a onga Amata, ma lato to mai fo i me tau whaia onga le winga le i a onga Amata tu so lato le nga te lele lato sao, sa fautua mo e matou le tolu, i le whaingola mātou so enga o le telefo i le sao a sa asia la tau le na whesoswani a mātou le whiloinga po wheo a onga a mata e tala whea ngai maongo mea i le mātou so enga a meisa fo i o le o a onga ngā e ono le mainstream pe ona tusa o a onga umai o nei i o kilangi saute. Tusa na so e loving ya onga Amata e a fo i a onga le mainstream a onga i a onga pālangi. Tusa e a fo i na so ingi a onga fo i e lata fo i lele i a maua se avanoa fo i lele e a fo i whailoa i ai e ma whai fo i na asi le si a onga le si a onga e te le a fo i le ngata le a fo i le whesoswani fo i le alanga oa e mai se fo i meto tia fo i le whai a onga te le a fo i le a onga na peona na fo i a mai le feedback mai a onga i a pālangi whaapea a fo i samata inga le a fo i le pe a whai le a fo i le pe a whai le circle le a fo i e whai le a whasa wha inga ta maiti fo i le e ese fo i me tau tia ia o ngā palalangi tu sa le mea nganga ai mai se fo i o le a fo i o le lalanga le a fo i pe o sisi ngā me tu tia fo i le ngā tāua fo i lele wa matanga langa fo i lele po le ase au ngā mo le ngati whai a onga a meisa fo i o se au ngā mo mātua ma ainga te lea le au ngā whaptai
it's beautiful to see that collective intergenerational sharing of knowledge, which leads me to my next question. How was the knowledge collectively gathered and analysed?
Oh, yeah. Just for it, te lea for e le ngati whai a onga i a onga Amata mai se a onga palalangi. And te le for le sao o ngai tina be to o valu ngai tina grandmothers Samoa a for sa whaile mato tufata singa i Vaughan Park tala noa fo ilele tala noa ile I aso o la iti tupu mai la to ainga ile ia o onga I la to matua a mai se fo o le a fo ile to te panga I tua I tiute a mai se fo o me na ngā luenga sa va ai la to o fai la to tina va tau le a fo ile a fo ile fala le o le falanga le Pepe Pepe Meamea falanga o le fala o le tusa o toe fafango fo ile Amata na malesi mea o le fofo pe o nga fo fa matala le tinale o le afionga ia Faalogo fa matala lon tina ia so ia le mena va ai le ngata le fala Pepe a me se fo le nga o le fofo le fongo alam whanau I mean te le ale fo o le nga fo le maftanga mato maftanga nga le ile na so tona I manai tina
te le foi lava ia workshops na fai I lunga le upenga te whailangi I lunga le sumuau o istaime e whaonga ia potua onga e whai ei mato whaasoa whaasoa le ia whaia onga the collective aspect of this research is very strong in that we don't build it ourselves. It's co-designed and that's how the data was collected and analyzed. O le a se me maua mai e toi ave umai whaia onga e mai le lato o lato manatu mawhinanga lo po saone me wha mau mau pe se. So it's very important we reciprocate ia mau ia na wao mai.
I just want to add to what's been shared already about the analysis of the data. And when we think about conventional methods of research, analysis is usually, transcription, talk about the text, talk about the concepts, and it's only a dialogue, really. But through the work of engaging traditional practices like weaving, and also the way that we come together as community, it's reframing of what data is. So it's realising that our siapo is data, our weaving is data, our fofo actually is the data, the practice, the smells of the oil, the way that we hold our babies, everything we do in the material world, the human and non-human world and interaction, it is data. So it goes beyond the written text. It's in our songs, it's in our chants, it's in our prayers. And so the richness of how we were to navigate data, I mean, even the stones became data in the whalapepe, the maatatau. So all of these things are infused in the way that we think about data. So this is the exciting part, is to innovate how we think about the research.
Beautifully articulated. As a researcher, I'm so proud that there are Samoan ways of collectively gathering data and analysing data, and that we don't necessarily have to stay to Western ways of research. La fionga Sala, o le atonu le winga o le Pepe Meamea whamole.
Whaftai lava ia e pipi atu fo le tali o fasili le ile awala na au ai fo ifina ngalo fa ya onga was collective na tu faile to fa workshop le winga o Pepe Meamea tele au mauna sau e pipi le tuspaia le taimi fa mai o le infant and toddler o le tama Meamea ono la sau tuspaia o le tama Meamea le o sau se Pepe Meamea ia matofa apelo ia langa ile ngi kamai Pepe e foi Pepe tene ia la walu ai lo fa Pepe Meamea ia ona ilo foi la ia la tonu le infant toddler sawele upu ia pe o le tele yo upu o le taulanga o le Pepe Meamea o le taulanga o le ngafa o fanua o Pepe e ngafa ai ia au ngā tupulanga e maua ia o Pepe o le Pepe Meamea o isi upuna mai whaia onga o le toto ele ia o isi le whaawinganga la po le ale, tonu le upu Meamea, wa le Pepe au le baby. O le Pepe. Ia, au le Meamea la, e sauai the vulnerability of being a young, pe o se, pe e maa ale. O upu ina mai whai aonga e maa ale, e mua, it's a young shoot. O le e a fua, o le whako a kupu wangi, o le tupu wai. Ia, pe o nei upu nai na maua mai. A mai loa tu whātasi, po o wheo upu ia, e fia foi upu tele ia upu ina mai.
89.
Ia, o le awha ingana upu na whamatala le infant and toddler. E saunga le analysis o le e pito tele ia le mention o le Pepe Meamea. So le la wa whapea, ia le la whaingoa loa la le Pepe Meamea. Ale mana ia upu e o le taimi le ave le Pepe e whaasau le tai au. E mana wa le sau le tai au. Ia sau wai lola ia ngāmeo no le we have to be gentle, the element of gentle, peaceful, well-being. O le upu Pepe Meamea. Ia le wālua ia whapea. Ai fela atu sesi pepanga le Pepe Meamea, what it means. Wai le na le framework le alu ia le mato Faasaulala so whaftai. E se whaopopo.
Ke lea walolomi le Pepe Meamea framework. Si whamakala mai maatatau e lima o le whaavaa o le Pepe Meamea whamui.
Ia, tu sai a fo i peiona saunoa na whiungi a Sala i la fo le framework leo le Pepe Meamea. Tu sai a fo e lima mai me tāua na fo i le so inga le tu sai a fo i o le me momua o le whaasino manga. Pei o le mele tāua le I tātou Samoa e whaatau le tukumaanga. A mai se foi o le whaatau le whaatauing o ngafa, lau ngafa. A mai se foi le tātou I tū le whaaleanganga, tātou spirituality. O le se foi mea le lona lua o le paipainga. Whaatau le loto I whale. A mai se lava I tonu o Aoga, le tau le ECE contextual factors, relational ecologies. O le si lea fo I lela vatu le whiunga ia Faalogo.
Yeah, the concept of whamanino was mentioned actually throughout all of the talanoa and meetings with our Aoga Amata. And we thought about tō whamanino and the ancestral dialogue that happens, and it's traditionally accessed through the sleep, the process of sleep when the High Chief accesses the ancestral knowledge. And we thought about this in terms of our infants. We asked ourselves, why do our infants sleep so much? Ia wa access fo ile tō whamanino. It's the sacred ancestral wisdoms that our infants access. So it's through these concepts, these rich Samoan concepts, we were able to think about, it is more than just a curriculum or a pedagogy. There is an ancestral connection that our infants and toddlers, our Pepe Meamea, they have a tofi to, they have an ancestral right and inheritance to. So the tō whamanino is the cultural knowledge or the cultural knowledge integrity in the work that we do. And it's really important that the Whaionga mentioned as well, how important it is to keep those ancestral connections. And it isn't universal, so those knowledge systems can differ from village to village, from family to family, and from context to context. So the way we think about tō whamanino is very much locally located. So that's another thing that had come through. And then the other concept I think here is Tagoilelagi-Leota, which is all about living. It's living the Samoan values, alofa, faalualo, tautua, all of the things that bring life and vitality into the early childhood context. And what sets apart our Aoga Amata to every other early childhood centre is the Samoan values are lived in the interactions, in the relationship, in the curriculum, and all ways of being through Tagoilelagi-Leota. I do want to circle back quickly though to the ma'atatao, the rocks. So this is something we learned. You know, we might be researchers, we are learning all the time, and this is the process of the ma'atatao. Now we talked about in our villages, right? And this is something I experienced myself, the importance of the rocks and the role of the children in gathering those rocks. So the rocks, the children in the village, they'll be sent down, so they'll run down to the water and bring back the selection of rocks. So children already have a role in that practice of weaving. Their role is to go and gather the rocks. Their role is to lay out the laufala in the sun. It's a whole collective practice. This is even before you've started weaving. So the ma'atatao are the securing rocks. Without the rocks, your fala is going to be crooked and you're going to have a lot of gaps. The rocks secure the integrity of the mat for the weaver. The weaving cannot happen without the ma'atatao. So these become our securing rocks. And guess what? The rocks can be moved all over. The rocks can be even used for the kaingamu. So the rocks have a useful practice and a tool in everyday living in the Samoan context. But the ma'atatao, or the touchstones in the context of the Pepe Meamea framework, are meant to be moved around, they're meant to be touched, they're meant to be lifted and used and mobilized. So it's the mobilization of the ma'atatao that brings a richness to the way that we master the art of weaving the whalapepe. So this is where it fits within the framework and the importance of the rocks. Malo.
The other way. Slide it the other way. Leo vai atua I aini tu singa wa uma ona lolomi publish ona ole nei suenga. The Pepe Meamea framework is published several times. Se I sauno mai lau a fionga Sala, le whengu ma le ma'atatao, po oa ia tō mai fauna tupunga mai le nei suenga whamolimoli.
Whawhitai ia lewa tau maua mai le, tau wawala mai ia winga le ma'atatao, ma le whenu, saunoanga le professor. Ai, te lei o lana o le tū whaleanganga o le maa, o nei, e tele na tau whaafiele ia maa I te tono le tuspa ia. Peo le maa le na foa ia, o I fo le na foa ia tawita. The slingshot ia. O maa o ina tā le papa e sau ina form of le papa. O mose na tā le papa. Tele yo o vaenga e sau le maa. So, e fo le lato healing element. E mawhaina whaamalo ina le tangata I le maa. Wai e isi fofo e whao ngā maa. E fu isi taimi e fua e fu le tangata le maa pe a whaalonga tā. E o le maa le na sau noa ia whaalongo. Ia e tatau. E tatau. A wā a le tatau o le whala. E pi o le whala. A le whenu. O whenu o tama I leo tau sila tuilunga. O whenu na o fasi lau whala. E so ai e ulu ai le whala. Ina ia mawhai wai le se lau whala e umi e tau luma le moto wei. E tau ana so pe ulu. Ia ai ai fo e le taimi ua wha le tonu ai ua pupu se I tulou ia le whala. E to e fono e ala I le ulu le wha ngā le whenu. It's quite a Pacific word because e whenu tātou, whenu tonga, whenu maoli. So I tia whenu uma ia le upu lea I ta unga o tama I lau whala ia. I ngā ngana uma le Pasifika. Because weaving is universal for Pacific. Ia o le angana, o le maa ma le whenu. O umalana tustusi, it's almost like ale aiva inga nei, the well-being of the mat. Ele ausia. e te tau lava o na iaile, awa ai fo ila i tatou o langa, tatou o whaiaonga, o whaiaonga o whenū ma maa te tau, o alo ma whanau ia o tau te tonoa o ngā amata. A se sele la lang, le whaonga ine, le whaiaonga o le maa te tau, ma le whenū, ia e wha le tonu fo i o langa o tamaiti te tonoa o ngā amata. Ai wha uma fo i, e kasi ale whenū ma le maa te tau pito sili ana tau, o le atua. O le atua e wha moe moe e whenū ina i tātou, wherever we are. O le atua o ia fo i o le maa te tau, i o tātou o langa. So, that's how we've, o nei to mai la iti na lena, na wā ili, ma sue, ma sangole, ina ia tau mawhai. E tau atu to the Western School of Knowledge. E le ai, wa levanga iai mea ia Samoa, wa levana iai, ia. Le ai whakawhiwa i lunga o maa, ma solo maa o kako pai i Samoa. Ia ale ilo te le o le tāua o maa nei. Pela nu le o solo, e tauta ua i the Black Rock. E fo i le natusi mai e il tinale o Dr. Lonise Tanielu. O lana framework e tau o le pai. Pai e whau i maauli ia. I mai solo. Ia wai tāua le, ia maa pe o le. E se fia whau popo. La tu titi sau, I whafo le tustu singa o lo o mau wai nei vaenga. Salo le tau sang fau.
Taya. What are some of the key findings from this research?
So the key findings really extend on the Whalapepe framework, but some of the key findings really identified the need for stronger cross-cultural mentoring programs. So especially realising that although New Zealand has tapasa, which is a Pacific Cultural Competency Framework, it actually isn't enough. So teachers actually need to access more ethnic-specific support, so specific to Samoan or specific to Tongan, because there are a lot of implications around just trying to homogenise Pacific. So that's one of the findings, is that we need more specific Samoan pedagogical frameworks and practice-led by cultural experts, by Samoan cultural experts. Another implication is around Ola Laulelei, which is about cultural well-being. So this is another concept that actually came out of the study, and looking more deeply into the nuances of cultural well-being. The difficulty around cultural well-being, it isn't easy to measure, because it is more of a qualitative concept, and so in terms of substantiating the value of cultural well-being, and these are in our young children, we will not see the value of those outcomes until they, transition into school, until they progress later in academic life. But what has been said by all of our whaiaonga is that they already see the value of it in their communities. So we have community voice saying the significance of cultural well-being does exist. The significance of cultural well-being includes the spiritual, which is often overlooked in education, and the whaasinomanga is absolutely critical to the cultural well-being of our young children. And the other thing we realised too is that there are a lot of New Zealand-born Samoan early childhood young children, who have not set foot on their ele in Samoa, and many young peoples growing up in New Zealand Samoan community have not actually gone back to visit homelands. What does it mean for research? How can we bring the homelands to you? And part of that is through our whalapepe. You can lie on your ele when the laufala is growing in your village. That is your ele when you lie on it. When you have the fofo, that is part of the ele. The ma'a is part of that ele. It's part of your ancestral connection. So this is something we realise in New Zealand, and I would imagine for a lot of our diaspora, transnational Samoan community around the world, not everybody has had the chance to go back to their village, and be connected to their whangua. But there's something very powerful about that whanua connection as part of whasinomanga. So that is one thing. And the other finding, I can go on and on, but the other finding is what I talked about in the beginning, is that our Aoga Amata are in a position where we are threatened of losing our services because of shifts in policy and regulation, and I am worried about sustaining our current Aoga Amata that we have in New Zealand, let alone growing more. So we are seeing at the moment a decline in our Aoga Amata services. So we want to see that there is a response to that, and it's all part and parcel with research. Yeah.
It's almost like the sector's going through a phase of ill-being.
Yes, ill-being.
No more well-being, but ill-being.
So yeah, and I worry for our teachers, because our whaiaonga, when I think about especially the elders, our whaiaonga who've been teaching for 30 years, that's 3 decades of teaching, and they're burnt out, they're overwhelmed, and they're not being supported as well as they should be. So, these are things that come out in the research. If our teachers are stressed, well, guess what? It's going to be felt across the early childhood sector. So I feel like we need to take better care of our teachers, of our whaiaonga, and that's another thing, that's come through. So the ola laulelei is also relevant for our whaiaonga. They need to have that sense of well-being as well. So, yeah.
You said, Whaftai lava mo le whaasoa, e whamon po iai ni a tātou whisini mai le awhia. So it's now open for questions for those on the floor, but I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
It was very insightful, a lot of the information that you guys shared. Are there other Aoga Amata outside of New Zealand? In other countries?
We have in Samoa, our Pacific is heavily influenced by the international ECE movement. American Samoa call theirs Head Start.
Yeah.
Fiji call theirs kindergarten. Samoa call theirs preschool.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, New Zealand is calling theirs Aoga Amata. There are a few people using Aoga Amata. I think it's the funders. If you get funding from, you have to call your center a certain name. Kukusa fo ilama Hawaii. O Hawaii o Head Starts uma fo ya. Yeah, laku fo ilai Australia. You don't hear Aoga Amata. Ai ngai little drips of Aoga Amata lai tau mawhai, and it's been through the churches. It's the Whaletua who's pushing for their Aoga Amata. In Australia, whaapea ia Hawaii, ia le tau mawhai to America. America has that's through San Francisco District School. Yeah, they're running a really successful model for bilingual. Amaka mai lalo, the pre-K aluanga ilunga le I Tamaiti le elementary. O lai tau mawhai whaatutua Aoga Amata ai le o le mea tonu ana ngā luenga tonu ana le AATA le tau mawhai atu iai.
I think it's interesting to observe as well, in terms of the international interest in Aoga Amata, it's realising that, in some contexts around Australia, Hawaii, the US, we're talking 2nd, 3rd generation born outside of Samoa. And so they're young parents who are wanting to engage with language revitalisation for them and for their children. So the one in San Francisco, for example, is that movement, and also having families involved in language learning. So I think, if we look at the legacy of Aoga Amata in New Zealand, strongly connected to the churches and our beautiful pioneers that saw the value of ola laulelei. They saw the value of the cultural knowledge of the languages, and now we're seeing around the world that there is a longing for that reconnection back to the culture and to the language, and especially for the next generation. Yeah.
Hawaii is quite interesting because they are looking at taking the concept or the practice of Aonga Whiwhiau and drive it from there as their Aonga Amata curriculum. You have Salamasina Fuimaono who presented last webinar, and also Tafili Lefaoali'i. They're looking at getting that across to establish it in one of the AATA churches, and that will be the village, the hub for language learning, for Aonga Amata, everything to do for the education continuum. Yeah.
Beautiful. There is a perception amongst some Samoans who live overseas in countries like Australia, New Zealand and America, where some of them feel the Samoan language isn't useful because we're living in a predominantly English-speaking country. What would your thoughts be on this stance?
I think it's important to hold on to your ngana Samoa, irrespective of whether you're fluent or not, because e leo tātou ni pālalangi. So for e whamamawhale langa ngana, ono le tūlanga ai mai sea fo pe e manatu mama ai to say o me uma tatonga ngana, you can't, you know, I can't phantom lea fo is le I twainga o langa pe a le aile le tatonga ngana Samoa to say longo via oi o le Samoa o ngo longa ngana ma le si mea o le Faaloalo e iei le tatou ngangana, but I mean something very similar o ma Faalogo o ma whanau o Awhakasi. E moni e le o ato o toa le ngangana Samoa a o lae ola se manatu fo ile le whape o lātou o tamaiti Samoa. E pei o le mea ngai fo i e whamamawhai fo i le whaata uinga. A le whaata uinga, we're going to lose it, and then we might as well be bālangi, but we're not. So that is the critical thing. E moni fo i we're not asking you to be fluent le whape la se lopa sene lo wha Samoa. Ai o lai iai le manatu fo i lo ngai te mita mo oe fia o oe le Samoa. Yeah, that's my whanonga.
Yeah, wa e whia lolo ngangana Samoa. But for me, it's a personal journey, because I realise there are limitations in the way that I speak the ngangana. And I live this as a mother as well. I'm a mother of children who are also Cook Island, you know, Dutch, Samoan, a beautiful mixture of the Pacific and parts of Europe. But I think one thing that I appreciate about the ngangana, it is I've always accepted that it's my mother tongue. You know, it's my heart language. And Dr. Raisi Ilara talks about that. You know, it's our Pacific language is your heart language. So when I hear my mother speak, or when I'm with my family, that's the language that speaks to my heart. And it's also the language that enables me to think differently about the world. So the ngangana Samoa is a different point of reference to understand the world, because the ontologies, the epistemologies, those ways of being, they're all infused in the language. And the language is poetry. There are so many nuanced different meanings within the language that I'm still learning, you know. But I would encourage any Samoan who is on their language journey, just keep persisting with it, and don't feel like you're not enough. Don't feel that just because you don't have it 100%, you're not good enough. Because, you know, we're all on this journey together.
He said. Another concern that I've heard from some Samoan people is some believe that speaking bilingually might negatively affect your English language speaking and comprehension. What are your thoughts on this stance?
That's still privileging English, you know, that kind of mentality. Remember, even if you're fluent in English and you pick up Samoan, that's still bilingual. And most of our children in New Zealand, some are bilingual Samoan Tongan, not English, or Samoan Cook Island or Tongan. So I would say whaonga umanga ngana nai mawhai o na mawai awai ole nanu ole nanu ai e whiwa ngangwe le sui ai le lano lo pa au tulo ele whaapea fo e God's not stupid to give us language and we don't benefit from language. Ma na tua fo le olo pa pelu le na tu ese umai tangata i ngangana fa ese le tuanga ngana, because he knows we will benefit from speaking our own languages. So everything is connected to the Bible. How we live now is something mo leva na ola ma soifua nei tangata le o yutaia vaenga umale na tutupu nei le nupa ia.
I mean, there's Jim Cummins, right, who's a professor, globally renowned for bilingual language learning. And his theory is we need to debunk these ideas that it's a subtractive approach to language learning. It's never subtractive, it's additive. So whatever your first language might be, you be strong in that language and you can build bilingual, multilingual. We have, and the best time to learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 languages is in early childhood, because that's the most rapid neurological development that children have. And actually having more than one language is your superpower that will help you think globally and act locally. You know, it'll help you be part of a wider fabric of community. And you have access to that with the more languages you have. So, you know, in New Zealand, we have children speaking Te Reo Māori, speaking Samoan, speaking Tongan, and English language. And you don't hear these children struggling, you know, between code switching. I think the issue is adults think that it's subtractive, but the research tells us it's additive. It's an additive approach. So that's what I would say, is look at the research, and the research tells us that it's a strength, not a weakness.
Yeah, and often our point of difference is often seen as a problem.
Yeah.
You're beautifully articulated. Where do you guys envision the Pepe Meamea being used, and how do you envision it being used, this amazing framework?
I think I would encourage all of our Samoan communities, families, locally, globally, use it in your home. It can be used in your home. It doesn't just have to sit in the early childhood context. You use it in your home. You can use those principles and values in your home. Use it with your grandparents. Use it when there's a new child born into the family. You know, even from the concept of whalapepe itself, from the time of conception, or even when you're thinking, you know, in the family you joke around, oh, who's going to have a baby next? When you start having those conversations, start thinking about Pepe Meamea. What is the world that you want to create in your home with your family that you want this child to be birthed into? Because that's the world you can create, you know, for your Pepe Meamea. So all of those principles, all of the practices, the fofo, you know, especially the practice of fofo, those are things you can do in your home. And speak to your elders, speak to your grandparents, your aunties and uncles. You will have experts, cultural experts in your communities. You just need to reach out to them. So the future, what I would like to see is that it is a living philosophy, that it's living not just on a piece of paper, but it's living in our homes, living in our churches, our communities, and living in our early childhood centres.
Some centres are already, just to add on to Faalogo, some centres o laua iai ia lato infant and toddler rooms wo whaingoa le Pepe Meamea as a result of this project. It might not be new knowledge per se, but it's already lawa alevanga Amata isi. Our ancestors have started it. We're just fangu koe whafangu mai mea sina. Ale atu nuu ia mawha mausali pe on sauno ai ia whaalongo. Whaonga ia. Te alusi se sao le nei whaavaa po le framework o le Pepe Meamea. Ina ia whaamausali ina ai. We're not saying it's going to make your practice better. It's going to make great changes that makes connection to how the children live or teach and learn. You know,
this is just such an awesome opportunity to learn from your guys' wisdom. Looking at all of the research in terms of Samoan language away from the motherland and Samoan language in the diaspora transnational context, where do you guys believe the direction for Samoan language research should head to next, and why?
I think aleni Aoga Amata, aleni Ekalesia, or those are the sites that are generating the use of language every decade. Aleni Ekalesia te tono atunu e fafo le ai mania Aoga Amata. Ai ele ola se ngana. To ale ola se ngana wa o Ekalesia ma Aoga Amata. That's fundamentally the grassroots platform for language development. Ai o isi atu nu ele se Aoga Amata ai fai mai lunga i university ia. O feme le blank umatuale ia isi sectors ai pe o New Zealand le taula mo le au Ekalesia Aoga Amata bilingual la tulunga ile high school. It's a taught subject Samoan. La kulunga university wa ki le alu. That's the continuum le whapeka ko ngana, but we're starting to see we're losing. We're losing Samoan language. Alewa umana whaatutuwa enga nei. So it might not be the formula. Whaonga e o lisia tunu e whaonga se si formula. Because we're still losing our speakers despite this continuum.
I think, and just to digress a little bit from that question and think about generations 50 years, 100 years down the track from now, we might ask the question, where will ngangana live? And what are the platforms that people will access the language? So we already know there's a growth of AI. We already know that a lot of the data and the way that people are engaging with language is online. So how are we creating our own language archives that future generations can access? Because, you know, Samoa is already global. You know, thinking about the protocols and practices, every aspect of life now is shared on social media, is streamed. The future generation of our practices is also a digital one. So I'm thinking, you know, for future generations, how are we creating a really sound foundation in the way we access and move in those digital spaces to generate and support the ongoing life of ngangana?
Beautiful. We have an awesome question from the floor. Has there been any research in including kids with special needs into programs like this? Have there been any interesting outcomes from this so far?
We've had centres who participated, who asked around the aspect of neurodiversity with children with multiple needs, and the Falapepe, as part of the project, has been used by centres for children with special because e wakuka maiki o la wafafola melana Falapepe, and I'd like to mention this ele la onga se ngongo a onga Amata. na fufola le fala pepe e faasana no fo istanga o le fala samu o samu e neurodiverse. So watu samu lai all children are respecting him, his space. No fo yana o samu lunga le fala pepe. Yeah, I faasai it's showing respect il tamatiti le ona mana onga faapitoa. It's just one way. There could be many ways.
Beautifully articulated. Do you have any last words to share with our viewers?
Go Sophia, I.
Kukusaka.
Say, tawani vavala itself foi po sina minuti say fala wi lo le mato te telefono le asol nei. Over to Professor Faamole, just to give everyone, because you all know who we are through the website that was given, but Lefaoali'i, just Faamole lava, le wa Faamole mentan Faamua. Se whailo atu alamato Professor ya Lefaoali'i Faamole.
We can put the camera on Lefaoali'i there. So Lefaoali'i Associate Professor Dr. Dion Enari is a New Zealand-born Samoan with ancestral ties to Malaila, Vaiala, Nofoali'i, Safune and Lepa. He's also an Associate Professor at the Research Centre, which is Ngāwaia Te Tui. It's a Unitec Māori and Indigenous Research Centre. He specialises in Pacific research, especially within diaspora communities. And I think he's the only one I know actually that is a strong advocate leading in Pacific scholarship for governance and leadership in sports. So I want to acknowledge your contribution to the academic world and also your energy and your enthusiasm for Pacific research and holding the space for our Pacific communities. So yeah, whawhata.
Any other final words before we wrap up?
Whawhatai atoa mo le whaavanoa lo time.
Yep, mo le atu whawhatai ne whawhatai te le le au waa ale a ata mo le wholasanga mātangu fie. Toi whaatupu manatu. Whaamalo le sango le ngone ma le whaamaite a wā alo ma whanau o Samoa. Whawhatai te le lava I de paia ma le mamalu o Samoa mai susunga I whaawhia ngainga ma o la tau whale tua, whai a onga, mātua ma le sauwha inga o tangata lau tele o Samoa I le ke lope. Whawhatai mo tapua inga o le nei whaamoi moi ia whaamanuia le atua. Whawhatai le tātou whale 5, Samoa, Hawaii, Amerika, Australia, ma New Zealand mo ia o tau whaita talo o whaatau nuai le nei whaamoi moi. Whawhatai te le lava I le Blue Wave mo ia o tau lango I ao ngā Amata I New Zealand. Lawa fionga I le whaatonu fui maono, Martin Anai, la sunga Ryan Patumaka, manatua o loo I ai fo I le tautua le Blue Wave e ala I le Blue Net, pe a mana ungia sa o tau Wi-Fi mo maota malawa. They got you with the internet. Ia whamungia le atua. O I ulai o le sauna mai ai le itulangi o Hawaii mo le tātou whaasoa pe a aulia mai le manuia le alofa o le atua. So I fua ma ia manuia le tautua. May I ask Dr. Tafili to end us in a closing prayer?
Ia, tai ia tatoi whamatatalo. Le atuai, lo mātou tamā, mātou te whawhetai, ua whaiui ma le manuia, mātou penga o Finangalo. Whamanuia le mamalu o le awhia, mai utulangi e whia, sa mo le mawina le nei taumawhainga vai. Whawhetai a onga Amata, ma onga le mainstream, mawhai a onga uma, sa au whaatasi le nei whaamoe. Whawhetai le a fionga ia fwoi maongo, malana au whainga luenga a le Blue Wave. Whawhetai fo e le mātou whono, whautua, ai meise le tapua inga, a mātou a inga. Whawhetai le a fionga, le Lefaoali'i, Dion, le sa tu I le foe, o le mātou tatalo le nā, le tua, ia tu mau pēr lau, tau singa, lo taita ia lofa, mo ata mana ngā luenga. Amene.
Amene.